Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. A month ago now I asked people who watch this channel to submit their hot takes with a Google form I created, and since then we have gotten some lingering opinions for me to break down and give my perspective on, and let me tell you, these get absolutely insane. Before we continue however, consider liking and subscribing to the channel since only 22% of you guys are subscribed. Let me remind you, I do BLUELOCK videos weekly and we are bound to even do some of your suggested BLUELOCK ideas, so there's no point in not subscribing. The first take on the entire form was submitted by Figgy. I also asked people who their favourite BLUELOCK character was and who has the best aura. For these questions, Figgy answered Nagi. Figgy's hot take states that Chigiri is going to break his leg during the U20 World Cup and Yukimiya will go blind as well. Whilst it is actually inevitable for Yukimiya to eventually go blind, and how that could be accelerated even further due to consistent strain is for sure guaranteed. Remember, Yukimiya always stated how he's on a time limit of what he can do before his time eventually runs out, meaning he doesn't have long in terms of his football career to accomplish his goals, and he needs his constant treatment in order to stall that process for as long as possible. So while Yukimiya inevitably will go blind, I don't think that will be during the U20 World Cup, but I think it will happen at some point in the series. However, for Chigiri, he has a much more controllable variable. He won't break his leg if he plays it safe, plays to his limits, and stick to what he's doing, but that's not Chigiri's style. Ever since his awakening, he's running every game like it's his last, and the consistent issue is how his leg is holding up with his latest evolutions. Whilst I don't think he's at much risk after conditioning from Manshine City, we saw how players like Himizu brought Chigiri to his absolute limit, almost breaking him down so much that he was frankly useless against the World 5 and had caused a stoppage during that match. I don't think he will break his leg, however I do think someone like Bunny could push Chigiri to his absolute limits due to his surface level of sadism, or even Loki makes Chigiri understand what it means to truly be unshackled and likely gets himself in a dangerous stunt whilst catching up to the rising star of France. I'm expecting an ACL tear scare instead of an actual tear, and Chigiri will be off for a few games to return as BLUELOCK super sub to try and win back at the France game that they lose during the table rounds. The next hot take is submitted by Ernom, who has a massive Hiyori bias. He states how Hiyori is the best midfielder we've seen so far, even above Sai Itoshi. Whilst I do credit Hiyori for being an amazing midfielder, his most credible moments as a player has passed by, as his absolute peak was against Ubers. Not to say that he has peaked and won't get better, but that's where his strongest feat stands so far, and due to that, I can reasonably say that there's maybe 4 midfielders who are better than him. Ness, Charles, Pablo, and yes, even Sai, I consider to be better midfielders than Hiyori. Okay, editing Raven here, I know Pablo isn't a midfielder, he's actually a forward for his team, but you know, you can't blame me. He plays as a really good player and he seems like he would fit a midfielding position. Just go with it. Or just pretend that I'm not saying Pablo. Whilst I won't deny Hiyori is arguably one of the best midfielders in the BLUELOCK facility, meaning that he's better than the likes of Reo and Karasu in my opinion, he is not better than these players outside the project. If you went off bids alone, he didn't even make enough to pass by Ness or even Charles, and by proxy, he wouldn't be better than Sai or Pablo, who are most definitely representing in professional matches. But I know bids aren't the best representation of who a better player is based off of feats. So let's do this instead. Whilst Hiyori is compared to the likes of Sai in terms of his passing abilities, he, as well as we, haven't even seen the upper limits of Sai's performance, and you have to remember, just because characters aren't featured in chapters doesn't mean they don't get better outside of the main focus. Sai has likely been steadily improving ever since the BLUELOCK vs Japan U20 match to seemingly rival Bunny, and still has his goal to become the world's best midfielder. Hiyori only had his evolution very recently, and I could argue maybe he's better than Ness and at a push better than Charles due to being more ideal in terms of a player personality to deal with over Charles's childish antics. But if Charles is directly stated to be Loki's ticket to becoming the world's best striker, whilst Charles is only at the age of 14, then who's to say that Hiyori will be able to even compete with Charles when he's already struggled against him by the time Charles is fully grown? And Sai definitely has more in his arsenal to show up Hiyori both in a one-on-one and a collective team effort. Overall, take this away. If Hiyori was better than been Sai, people wouldn't be comparing his passes to Sai, and instead would be comparing Sai's passes to Hiyori's. Enough said. But I won't doubt Hiyori will be able to compete on a very close level to Sai very soon. This next one comes from Yahya Mohammed. His hot take states, Rin was robbed in the U20 match when he beat Sai. I know the ball probably wouldn't have gone in, but I still feel like he should have scored the final goal. That statement is kinda contradictory, but ignoring that, would Rin deserve the final goal? Yes, but Isagi's prediction of Rin winning against Sai in their matchup was the factor in which made BLUELOCK win the game in the final moment. And yes, it was a factor made up from luck, but as Ego explained, luck is only given to those who maximize the possibility of obtaining it for themselves. Isagi was fortunate as a result in believing Rin would win and knowing where the ball would fall in the end, but it was due to his actions and learning the values of maximizing opportunities created by chance he was able to win the game for BLUELOCK. And considering the immense amount of impact that Isagi had that entire game, I'd always argue that Isagi deserved that goal even more than Rin. You can argue that Rin winning his final matchup against Sai would have him score the final goal, but that is just not the circumstance that occurred, nor would it be a realistic one. If Isagi wasn't there and Rin was free to chase after the ball, he wouldn't have enough time to get to it before another Japan U20 player retrieved and cleared the ball. And if Rin did fully win against Sai, he would likely stagnate in this performance, maybe becoming satisfied and therefore not having a rival within BLUELOCK to push him past his limits as he accomplished his one overarching aim. Staying on the topic of Rin, Hani states how Rin is badly written. His whole backstory and dynamic with Sai is childish, his whole destroyer mode and reasoning for it is cringe, and bro needs to keep that tongue in his mouth please. This seems like an opinion that wouldn't be changed by my input, but since this is my video about how I feel about these hot takes, fuck it, you're wrong. Everyone processes trauma-related incidents very differently. To call someone's reasoning for revenge and facing their trauma childish can seem very disingenuous to the individual who is suffering because you're not that person who's processing those emotions. If you have gone through something similar, the circumstances won't ever be exactly the same because you're not Rin. His destroyer mode is a product of his aspirations to destroy his brother and make him see the error in his ways, and it's a complete contrast to Sai's beautiful way of destruction because Rin destroys in his hideous matter, and it's not supposed to be appealing physically. It's the embodiment of his true ego, one that's pushed him to the depths of the water, discovering amalgamations that closely align to the toxicity he feels towards his brother and his mindset towards football. Rin was the first one advanced enough in BLUELOCK to know that this was the mindset needed in order to compete on that next level. He just needed to adopt a playstyle that wasn't exactly the same as his brother's because he fell into the habit of playing like his brother from the many years they spent together, and due to that he was finally able to let go of his fixation towards his brother to focus on what rival could push him further in his current state, and Isagi embodies that fellow striker who understands the mentality of putting your life on the line for football. Also, the tongue hanging out thing is a common trope in athletes when they're focused or locked into the game. Shido, Charles, Ryo, Bachara, and Loki have all done this as well. It may look unnatural since Rin is almost fiendish with the way that he does it, but that just plays into his character as someone who's unapologetically unhinged. Next up, King Tank Games hot take states, Bachara is a much better striker than Shido, and Shido wouldn't have been in the top 5 if Nagi didn't fall off a cliff. The top 5 would have been Rin, Isagi, Burū, Nagi, and Bachara in that order. The results of the NAL bid shouldn't matter because they aren't completely representative of who the better strikers or better players are, they only represent how clubs value their performance. In regards to who I think is better between Bachara and Shido, however, when you put the words best striker into the mix, I would always ask what your perspective of a better striker is, so let's break it down. Bachara is more likely to get into a scoring situation than Shido on his own, but striking ability obviously goes to Shido considering he scored more unexpected and unstoppable goals than Bachara has. We have seen Bachara's goal attempt stopped a few times in the series, even if he managed to get past most of the opposition alone with his dribbling, because his striking ability does not come up to the standard of strikers like Rin, Isagi, Burū, and of course, Shido. But if I had to pick personally, Bachara would be my choice for a player over Shido for the time being. However, I wouldn't vouch that Bachara deserves a higher bid basing it off how the bidding system was stacked in the favour of a player like Shido. His goals were flashy and explosive, making him an eye-catching player. He may have one less total goal than Bachara, but PXG has won more games. games. Plus, Shido was the one to awaken Charles and prove that he was dangerous enough to bastard Munich to be man-marked for the majority of the final game. Not to mention, I think PXG just has more money than FC Barca does, and no other club really showed as big of an interest in Barca for it to be highly competitive. The next hot take is submitted by Striker Player 1, who says Isagi isn't helped by the plot, very slightly at most. I believe a misconception of Isagi's entire character is that because he's the main character, he has this aspect of plot armor and doesn't actually show any progressive improvement that makes sense or even works well in the narrative, and I completely disagree with that. I believe that Isagi isn't helped by the plot much at all, and that's due to how I read into the story and how I draw the connections. A surface level reader would look at the story and acknowledge that Isagi needs other people in order to play well at all, which therefore disregards his accomplishments as a player. But then there's more attention to detail readers who know that Isagi would need other players to pull things off, but it's because of how he's developed himself that he's able to use that to his advantage, making him a better player because he embraced this holistic freedom ego type. Using people to your benefit doesn't automatically mean that you would be able to get goals. It means that it can help you improve as an individual, so when the situation comes up when you're on your own, you are capable enough to handle it, and through Isagi's constant implementation in matches and also syncing up with players far more individually capable than he is able to take what he's learned from all these encounters for a play in which will provide him a beneficial outcome, sometimes an evolution, sometimes a rebellion, and sometimes it's a goal scoring opportunity. Nothing about Isagi's progression feels like bullshit plot armor. A lot of it happens with Isagi's past teachings in mind, and he is able to combat his own weaknesses and work to fix them or adapt to it. We see this occur naturally with how Isagi doesn't know about luck, and upon being taught the fundamentals, he's able to maximize the opportunity of obtaining it, which allows him to mold it into success. Then his stability in court is weak, and when he's thrown off balance, he can't shoot. The solution doesn't happen instantly. It takes many more chapters for him to fix an issue Sai took advantage of in the BLUELOCK vs Japan U20 match, where then Kaiser took advantage of it later in the story. He then trained to overcome this glaring weakness and scores in a situation where he's being intentionally sabotaged by his own teammate. And even after this goal, he's not able to pull it off as easily because other players realize his new lefty direct shot is only a fraction of the power of his dominant leg. So it may be a solution, but it's only temporary. There's many more examples earlier and later in the series of Isagi showing understandable and explained ways of developing. Plotsugi doesn't exist. It's just the audience's way of comprehending aspects of the manga that doesn't make sense to them. They aren't patient enough to wait for Isagi to do something, and when he does actually do something, they ignore all prior content and only focus on the result, in which leads to the term plotsugi. Basically, if plotsugi is an existing aspect in your mind, like this hot take said, it's very minuscule, and if you think Isagi needs the plot to justify his growth, you have zero reading comprehension, as the main character is shown growing with his matches and new experiences all the time. The final hot take I wanted to discuss this video is submitted by Xenonova, stating how Nagi would have been a better player if he played for FC Barca instead of Manshine City. I want to be honest and say I don't necessarily agree. Whilst FC Barca would get a significant buff with a player like Nagi on the team, it's just not fitting for him. The route that would make most sense for his improvement is if Nagi listened to Agi instead of backtracking to Reo when accomplishing his aspiration was too hard with a football that starts with him. However, instead of dissecting this hot take fully, I want you guys to let me know. Should I cover a series where Nagi goes to FC Barca? If this video hits 500 likes, I might do it, but it will be a bit different compared to my other what if videos, as I plan to cover the entire what if scenario in just one video. No parts, just a constant stream of hypothetical covering all of the NEL arc in one video with Nagi playing for FC Barca. So before you go, remember to like and subscribe if you want to see that series, and check the form in the description if you want to submit some hot takes for me to cover in the future for a part 2. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and until next time, peace.